He's in immigration law. Okay, I am, as one of the founders of SSA, we came about after the lockdowns in March 2020 and became very active after Trudeau's announcement to reunite families June 8, 2020, leaving spouses from visa-required countries out of the equation. The sponsor has a great burden to carry, which oftentimes leads to financial instability, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and not to mention anger, bitterness, and resentment, which stems from long-term depression. Spousal sponsor advocates believes that a husband and a wife should not be separate for any length of time, regardless of the race, age, gender, and nationality. We believe the current immigration process for outland spousal sponsorship from visa-required countries is cruel and inhumane, and we want to see a change. There are, of course, many different immigration streams and programs, but today we will be specifically talking about the outland spousal sponsorship. I would like to welcome Mr. MP Jasraj Singh Hallan. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Misha.
You're welcome. So I have a couple of questions for you regarding your title. First of all, it's really nice to have you here. So Jasraj, may I call you that?
Yeah, you can call me Jasraj or Jazz, whatever is easier for you.
Okay, perfect. First, I would like to ask you, what is the role of a shadow minister?
That's a great question. I just want to start off by saying I'm really honored to be asked to be on this panel with my really good friend Jatin, who's just one of the best lawyers, such a hardworking and honestly one of the most empathetic lawyers that I've met, on top of being good friends. And Misha, thank you and for your whole team for all the great advocacy work to bring about all these issues that people are having, especially through this pandemic. So as for your question, what's the role of a shadow minister? So the Conservative Party, our party, sits as Her Majesty's loyal official opposition. So it's not something that we have to always go against what the government is doing, but our role is we are a government in waiting. So we are, as our role as a shadow minister and as being inside the official opposition, our role is to make sure that we are holding the government to account and making sure that we are doing things in the benefit of Canadians and Canada first. We need to put that in front whenever we are making any decisions. As far as immigration goes, as a personal feeling that I have, that immigration should not be a partisan issue. The process, we should be able to, that can be partisan in some senses, but at the end of the day, we want Canada to be the best it can be. And immigration plays such a huge role in that. We need to ensure that immigrants can succeed, because immigrant success is Canada's success. And that includes, a big part of that includes reuniting families and making sure we have great family structures when they get here. Economy has a big part to play in that as well. So if we don't have a streamlined, proper, efficient immigration system, you name some of the things that it does. It breaks families, it causes all sorts of stress, and that doesn't help anyone out, and that does not benefit Canada at all. So that is basically what our role is, to make sure that we're giving solutions to the many issues that Canadians are facing.
Thank you very much for explaining that. Honestly, I like the fact that that there's opposition in Parliament, because that's what really helps helps the system altogether. I mean, without the critics, then we would be lost, honestly. So we really appreciate the work that you do, Jasraj. Thank you for that. It. Yeah. So I'd like to ask you as well, how long have you been sitting in on the Immigration Committee?
So I've been on the committee itself since I was elected October 2019. And I'm once again on that same committee, which will be starting again at the end of the month, or in a few days, basically.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. Since the study of the impact of COVID-19, which was actually launched by Raquel Dancho from the Conservatives, thanks to her, we had the study. Are you aware of any implemented changes for the spousal sponsorship family class?
I'll start off by saying that I'm very grateful for Raquel for all the amazing work that she did. That study in itself was a very extensive study that had some really detailed recommendations that came out of it. Jatin was on that panel, gave some amazing recommendations. We had other people that came in, gave some really great recommendations. This is the most frustrating part of my job, is that we see great announcements, we see these recommendations put forward by some amazing people. Where the Liberal government, in my eyes, have failed over and over again is the implementation of these things. That it's great for us to throw money at an issue, get all these recommendations, but they must be implemented in order for Canadians and for people that want to come to this country to have any type of faith that this government is taking them seriously. So we have seen some implementations. One of those was the TR to PR pathway. That was something that myself and another lawyer had discussed inside of that same study. But again, we haven't seen too much implementation. And one indication of that is the 1.8 million in backlog that we have in this country right now. It's the highest ever. And we don't see any action being taken on it. Like, I asked this question over and over inside in Parliament. I do write letters to the immigration minister. I don't get any responses at all from the minister. And in the House of Commons, if you've seen the theme, it's basically pat yourself on the back for a job well failed and just keep saying how great of a job you think you've done. But these are my frustrations because I feel the pain of those families that are separated. We get emails all the time. We had a panel with the group as well that came on early on and talked about the actual real life consequences of what these backlogs are doing. They're keeping families separated. They're causing all sorts of mental health. Their parents can't see their kids' first steps, their first words, their birthdays, these milestones that families should be able to, be able to see in person. On top of that, we do have this thing, like we have a labor crisis going on in this country. It's not to say that people who are going to be coming here are going to be doing labor, but there is a shortage in this country. And people want to reunite with their families, but they also want to work when they get here. People want to contribute to Canada. That's why we have been pushing for a better system. And again, every letter I've written is very detailed of how we want that. But again, the issue comes down to the implementation. This Liberal government does not take that seriously, because if they had a long-term plan, they would not have switched 4 immigration ministers within 6 years. If you were serious about a long-term plan, you would keep a minister in for longer than you would. The last minister was in for about a year, almost 2 years, I believe, sorry. And if they were serious about clearing up the backlog, they would not have switched the minister. That's my opinion on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think that a job can be well done within a year. It takes a while, and with the complexities of immigration itself, we need to have a minister at least 4 years, like 4 years straight. It would really, really help the system altogether. But it's great that you're sitting in the immigration committee, and hopefully, if another party wins, then you never know what can happen with what the future brings us. Hopefully. So I think you sort of answered my question about what actions have you taken to advocate on behalf of spousal sponsorship. But if you'd like to just maybe go more in detail, that's fine.
Absolutely. Everything that we do, I make it very public. It's all up on my social media pages. The letters that we write, the correspondence that we have, post articles regularly, because I know that the minister and their staff are also looking at that. So the more we can keep pressuring, the more we can make sure that we can make the system better. We've done, we've put in all avenues that we can, and we do regular updates as well. So that's what I've been doing, and people can follow along and see the other work that we do within this committee. That's another great way for us to really get in and target in on these backlogs that are causing all these delays. Misha, it looks like you're paused right now, so I don't want to keep a delay. Jatin, why don't we just continue this conversation? I'd love for people to know some of the stuff that you said during that the presentation when you came to the SIM committee and gave some of those recommendations.
Thanks, Jasraj. You know, I want to begin by echoing just your comments earlier. Thank you. I'm incredibly excited to be here. Again, it's sad that we have to have this conversation again, almost a year and a half into the pandemic. I remember when we did something similar to this together almost a year and a half ago. But yeah, I mean, you really anticipate that when especially when the pandemic started. Hey, Misha.
Misha, I took over your role for just a little bit. I've asked Jatin a question to fill in the gap, and then we'll go back.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, Misha, we can hear you.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but...
We're filling in for you. Jatin was just in the middle of answering a question I asked him. I filled in for you. So let's let Jatin finish, and then we'll go back.
Okay, I'll just put myself back on mute. Are we good?
Sure.
Okay.
We were just talking about my experience and just the general experience of the standing committee in conducting their research with regards to the impact of COVID-19 on immigration back in 2020 and then leaking into 2021. I was just going to say that I do remember having the opportunity to speak, to give comments, to give advice, come up with creative solutions, and it wasn't just me; it was a ton of our colleagues. And it was funny because especially in the legal space, there's a lot of just similar comments coming out in terms of quick fixes, quick solutions, maybe some policy changes. And of course, the report came out in May 2021. If any one of the viewers have had a chance, it's actually people think government reports are really they could be boring or per se, but I mean, I read almost all of it because it was really interesting to see some of the ideas that were coming out, and unfortunately, I don't think many of them have been implemented yet. And some of them, especially with the technology changes, right? That we have it's just a way of life now. All of society has really adopted work from home mentalities and those types of solutions. I just don't know why it's not that simple to implement internationally at various visa offices, for example. I think interviews, for example, was one of my biggest points, was a delay in interview scheduling. So, I mean, are we going to see, I can't predict the future. We were talking before this live about upcoming announcements and the government's really advertising their February announcements. I suspect it's going to be majority of it's going to be just talking about levels planning. I don't know if there's really going to be much on incredible changes to policy or new programs, maybe, but I'm expecting just a levels plan to come out, and we're going to go from there. So we'll see. Misha, I'll send it back to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm just trying to actually see if we're streaming right now live, if it's a blackout or not, but I think it's okay.
Looks good.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
We're okay. Perfect. Sorry. Okay, so let me just take a look here. Okay. So, okay.
While you're looking at that, I'd just like to add to Jatin to say that I'm so impressed, and it's great to see that there's Jatin and his other colleagues across from different law offices and practices that really bring the voices of all of their clients forward, because that's what helps us at the end of the day. Their boots on the ground, because they're the ones who are echoing the real hardships that the people on this call, the people that are watching this, the people that email us and tag us, it's their hardships that they're bringing forward and advocating for them. So I just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to all of them.
Yeah, that's true. Honestly. Yeah, it's true. Honestly, I really want to thank Jatin. I've seen him speak in Parliament, and I felt the connection right away. He's very down to earth and human, and so are you, Jazz, to be honest. So I really appreciate you both, and I think that it's great to have us three together today, and hopefully people will be hearing this, and the changes will be implemented eventually. So I have a question for you, Jazz. With the growing backlog, have you approached the new Minister of Immigration, Sean Fraser, about the outland spousal sponsorship backlog because it differs from the inland and spouses are physically separated?
Yeah, great question, Misha. Look, the first, anytime there has been a new minister, I've made a point, especially when I got appointed as shadow minister the first time, to set a meeting right away with the new minister. I did lay out what I saw as three big things. The number one, always first and foremost, is the backlogs. That includes all applications. Within the backlog, some of the stuff that we brought up in the committee's recommendations is that we need to have modernization to the immigration system. Jatin touched on it briefly about interviews. We need to make sure, like, we're living in 2022. We've been in this COVID pandemic for 2 years. We should have been able to figure this out by now. There's enough resources, there's enough people inside there, but there's a cultural change and environment change that needs to be brought by the Liberal government, whoever is in charge, to fix these problems that are in IRCC. So backlog was my number one issue. Within that is those outland sponsorships, those outland applications. I've talked in detail to him about different issues. The posts that we make, they talk about the different streams and how we need to clear them up. The second thing that's very concerning is the racism within IRCC that I brought up with them. And this, in my eyes, could also contribute to the backlog because of the racism within IRCC and against different countries. Because if that's the kind of environment and if that's what's going on, then that's very concerning that certain applications from different countries, whether it's outland, inland, whatever sponsorship or even visitor visas, it's very concerning to see that could be a huge issue as to why they're not being processed. The third issue that I brought up was Afghanistan. We knew that when Kabul fell, things were a mess. And I'd just like to make it well known to the people watching this that our MP offices, even though we were not MPs at the time, because when there's an election going on, you're a candidate again. But our offices are still running. But our offices were shut out from doing any inquiries in that time because the IRCC, they were saying, could not handle it. And you know what? That's very concerning to me because our country should be able to do more than one thing at once when it comes to processing. And what did that do? It delayed more and more and more of these applications, putting people in more limbo, putting people into more hardships. So first of all, we should not have had this, unnecessary, expensive election that was useless, that ended up having no change except a really expensive cabinet shuffle. We used $650 million. Those resources could have been used towards the immigration system to either hire new people, update our processes, or do something with that money. But this, Prime Minister called this unnecessary, selfish election that had no change except for the people that were applying suffered even further. Our MPs' offices were shut out. So, to your specific question, I've been advocating and our party has been advocating for just a clear up of the backlogs. We need a plan. And that's what I've been asking the minister over and over and over again. You've been saying we've been throwing money at it. All we've been doing is piling on new announcements. But what's the plan to clear up the backlog? And I've started a hashtag, clear the Liberal backlog. And it's just for that. It's just to say that let's get serious about this and get families reunited now.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. It's extremely descriptive, and I appreciate that message, honestly. So if you were appointed to be the Minister of Immigration, what changes would you implement immediately and in the short term for the spousal sponsorship family class?
Look, I'll just say that we've had some really great recommendations from people, especially from Jatin, other advocates as well, other people who came to the committee. And the number one thing is obviously the focus should be this backlog. How can we do that? There's some easy ways to do it. There's some immediate ways, and then there's long-term ways. Some of the immediate ways that I've heard is we could do a better triage system like we see in the hospitals. When you're getting an intake of these applications, just a better triage of what application can go where. Some are easier to process than others. I've talked to people that work within IRCC. Some of them are, I give this example, but I'll just say it again. There's people in IRCC, some of them who can process, let's say, 30 or 40 applications at a time. And there's, those people are quick, and those guys are like Jatin. And there's some people like me who may only be able to do 10. But they're saying that after they're done applications, sometimes they have this free time. Why not train us for other applications? Why are we not getting training for other things so that, everything can be passed along? It doesn't need to be restrictive to just one office. So if they get more training, it'll be better. I think along the way, we also need to have cultural appropriate training. Because of this racism issue, I think some officers, and we hear this all the time, the officer says one thing, the notes aren't very detailed, and then the constituent who's coming in, whose life has just been ruined because of a decision that's made by this officer, they're saying something else. I think that Jatin had a great idea that we should record these interviews. We should make sure that the officer is just as accountable to prove the fact that why did he or she reject that application. And if there is a rejection, there need to be detailed notes on why that happened. And that was one of the recommendations that came out, because as we know, in some cases, what the constituent is saying and what the officer is saying are two separate things. We need more accountability. We need more transparency. We need our system, I would say, to look like Amazon now, where you know where your application is, you apply, all the steps that are in there. Everything should be just crystal clear, because applicants are the ones suffering. And you know what? Canada suffers if we don't have a good immigration system. So these are immediate, and the long term would be to get rid of this backlog in different ways, introduce different programs that would be more beneficial to even small things like every region has their own issues. Sit down with those provinces and find out what kind of resources they need in order to help to make this immigration system better. So, and these are not recommendations that we would do. These are the things that we have been putting forward. This is not something that we want to keep secret from the government. And partisan issue, we need this backlog cleared up.
That's fantastic, Jazz. I think you nailed the hammer in the board. Hammered the nail in the board is what I mean. Actually, in regards to the accountability, I do think that interviews should be recorded. I mean, in this day and age, in 2022, I highly recommend that these interviews be recorded for accountability purposes. I mean, it can't just be the constituent against the agent, I
agree.
Yeah, and I actually, we will mention Mississauga after, because it seems like as if it's there's nothing happening over there. But I have another question for you in regards to if Sean Fraser was watching this live stream today, what message would you want to relay to him?
I'll just reiterate. I'll just hashtag that. Clear the Liberal backlog. That's what we'd say. Get families together. Let's fix this issue that's making our Canadian small businesses that are suffering from this labor shortage and just a shortage. We see supply management issues that are happening. There's a crisis happening in this country. But first and foremost, let's get families reunited. Let's stop the suffering. Let's clear up this backlog. Let's bring up the system up to date. That's what I would say. And please, that would be answering the call to all the people watching this and those families that are going through the hardships.
Okay. Also, on a personal note, because you're a politician and people tend to forget that you're human. So this is just a personal question to you. What do you value most?
You know what? I value a couple of things, and this is, I'll just put a little plug in for the Conservative Party. It's things like hard work, dedication, and just this feeling of faith. I'm a very, I believe really deeply in my faith. But what it taught me was that keep positive all the time, and you can keep positive by just remembering hardships come. Just keep moving forward. I'll just give a small example to the people listening in about how I really learned that in my life. There's two examples actually. The first one was that I ran provincially. In 2019, I did not win, but I was taught by a lot of people, and especially by someone like Jatin's dad, who was a former MP himself, that it's never the result that should be your determining factor of your happiness. It should be the journey that goes along the way. You should not be sad for the fact that you put in that hard work. The result, I believe, is in God's hands, but keep that faith, keep going, and stay strong. Because although I didn't win provincially, an opening had come for this federal position. And in the same year, I went from losing one provincial election to, winning. And now I'm very fortunate to represent the amazing people of Calgary Forest Lawn that I don't take lightly at all. So my message is that stay positive as much as possible. I know it's hard on those days, but just keep that faith, because that's what gets people through. The second example I wanted to give was, my second daughter, there was a lot of issues with her health. And if it wasn't for the faith, it wasn't for the support that we had, we would not have gotten through at that point, because there was a point where we almost lost her twice. This is during a time when I was running in a provincial nomination. So I just want to give this out there to the people listening, that I know that you're going through a lot. I know just that there is suffering that people are going through. Keep the faith, keep talking to people, do not stay quiet. Bell Let's Talk was just yesterday or 2 days ago. But the point is, let's talk, continue the conversation. I encourage everyone, and I do this on a daily basis, call somebody, just pick up the phone and reach out, because most people are suffering in silence. It's better for us to, if you have, I have a list of 3 people I call every day, randomly, whether they're, every single month I complete that list, because you never know what someone is going through until you call them. So keep the talking, keep that conversation going. Sorry, that was a little long, but those are the kind of things that I wanted to encourage everyone with.
Thank you, Jazz. I really appreciate it. I've seen you witness a lot of the testimonies, and I know you're full of compassion. And I really thank you for being here today and sending out this message to everybody. And I really hope that you continue to do the amazing work in the immigration community. And with Sean Fraser, I hope that things change very soon. And I thank you here today. We're really, really, really grateful. Thank you.
I should say likewise, because I'm just grateful for all your guys' advocacy work, that you're being the voice of those people that are suffering due to these backlogs and delays. Jatin has been nothing but an amazing advocate, echoing those voices. And there are cases between both of our offices. Sometimes people are in such tough positions. It's just great to be a part of this network, along with you, Misha, Thibault, Jatin, and many others, that we're able to echo these voices. And that's the whole point. So thank you. It's absolutely my honor. And I'm looking forward to continue working with all of you.
Excellent. So now we're going to move along to Jatin Shory from Immigration Law. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, Misha, it's absolutely my pleasure.
I actually just, I can ask you both the question. I know that Jasraj needs to go very soon, but maybe you guys can just let us know what's going on with the Mississauga office out here in Canada.
I'll just start off. I'll say, Jatin, hey, what's your experience with this Mississauga office? What's going on? And give us some experiences, and then tell us what they can do better.
Where do I begin? Look, the PR system has undergone some changes. This online application this online application portal has been created, but even these new changes we're seeing the same issues basically happen. Backlog is a key word. It's the theme of the hour here, and the reality is that we're finding, on one hand, it's taking an incredibly long time for application file numbers to be coming back for many of these families, whether you're inside Canada or whether it's an overseas application. And what's actually even more, I think, just really a problem that immigration IRCC needs to fix is, if you're going to bounce back a package, don't do it 7 months later, because that is devastating for many people, especially when they find out that, okay, just because of the signature, this entire thing is going to come back. We've seen a lot of inconsistency in our time, and even I'm talking from 2019, even just before COVID days, where some files get bounced back, and other files we get an email where for the same issue, and one officer seems to have chosen the more humane route and said, hey, just send us the file. and another officer shows in, we're just going to send this back. So that inconsistency in intakes, right, and the kind of training and the kind of decisions that can and cannot be made, I think that's really a starting point. And Mississauga is the first place an application goes, right, whether it's in Canada or whether it's overseas. I think it's time to start looking closer at what we could do to streamline the process at the beginning to make it more efficient as it just goes through the pipeline.
I can attest to that as well. I mean, before I go, I'll just say that there was this case where this this woman had put in an application. One checkbox was not checked off. The horrifying thing was that they sent it to the wrong address. They didn't even send it to her address by mistake. They sent it somewhere else. Like, we're putting people who are extremely hardworking, who don't always have time to follow up on their applications, because some of them work 2 jobs sometimes. Like, people are really hardworking through this pandemic, especially. And to have that happen to them, that woman had said, if I didn't follow up on this, I wouldn't even have known. It would have been months and I could have just been sitting there. So again, another plug that let's turn this into like Amazon. We need more transparency. And Jatin, I know you hear all these kind of horrific stories all the time. And that's why we really need to fix this system and just clear up these backlogs and make sure we're more modernizing along the way. So I'll sign off here. I just want to say again, thank you all so much. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure.
Thank you, Jasraj. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you for being here. All right, Jatin, welcome again. Thank you so much for being here. So I guess we'll start talking about, first of all, the fact that we both spoke in the Immigration Committee. You made a lot of wonderful recommendations, and the study is actually available in the Parliament website. And I welcome you all to take a look at all the wonderful work that Jatin has done so far. He's on LinkedIn too. He usually writes about his accomplishments and his wins, which I'm very proud of. And I follow you religiously. And that's why I invited you here today, because you're so down to earth and just very proud of the work that you do, honestly. So a lot of members are wondering about the writ of mandamus. Is that how I say it, actually?
That's the one we command.
Okay, perfect. So I have a lot of questions for you. I hope you're ready. What is a writ of mandamus?
Well, I think a lot of even the viewers and potentially even people who will be watching this in the future, the recording in the future, if they've been waiting for quite some time for their application to process, they may have come across the word mandamus or a writ of mandamus. And basically it's the one tool in the legal toolbox where you can possibly, and I say possibly because you might not win, but you could possibly put up a fight against the government and really twist their arm a bit to just come to a decision at the end of the day. So it is a legal remedy. It's something that you apply for at the federal court. There's steps to get there, but basically you're going to the federal court and saying, look, especially in this context, look, my application has been in process for X number of years over the initial processing time, and I'm frustrated, and this is going nowhere. And I've checked in 100 times, and you know what? I need you to now step in and tell the government to do its job. And so when we go to the federal court or start these types of applications, it always starts with a demand letter, like literally telling the government, we're going to sue you if you don't finish this file because it makes no sense. The outcome doesn't mean it's going to be positive, but you will get an outcome. And sometimes that's what people want, right? They want a decision because they need to know what to do next. And what I find is sometimes knowing that there is access to certain appeal remedies are actually enough motivation, because normally if you win the appeal, your files are prioritized, you kind of push it along. But that's not to say that's a good solution. I mean, that's a lot of time. You add another year, probably, if you do end up going all the way down that route, another year to a file that otherwise should have just been finished when it was finished, right? But mandamus has been, I think, for most of our clients that choose that route, they're just like they're tired and they want an answer. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That answers the question. So basically, it's to get movement on the file. From my understanding, I mean, once you start taking it to court, I guess it sort of like hits a light switch and then makes things move a little quicker, thanks to I mean, having lawyers and stuff. Now, what is a reasonable amount of time for an applicant to apply for a writ of mandamus? What do you think is a reasonable amount of time?
I would say 13 months, but that's not practical. Because if the government's going to promise us 12, they hold us to our promises all the time. So I say, okay, we're going to do 12, then let's get it done in 12, right? No, the reality is everything is case by case. But what I generally do is if I'm approached by someone who's in that like 28-month time period, yeah, 28 months, because IRCC has a way of categorizing their files when they're doing intake, and so there's like the simple files or the complex files, and many people may feel from a common sense perspective their file is simple, and I think for many people it is. Jasraj is talking about a lot of preconceived notions, right, in terms of officers and their approach to files, a lot of racism, a lot of maybe even, I don't want to say bad training, but just maybe like a lot of misjudgment on files and generalizations. And so these types of things all of a sudden make a file complex. When we get approached by someone who has a significant delay, we interview them and we figure out, just tell us about your relationship. Tell us about, let me get to know what happened in terms of when you first met, how it developed, and that whole story in between. And we were pretty quick to figure out, okay, well, you know what, these might be the red flags that they believe exist, which then all of a sudden categorizes your file as complex. We find that when we argue a writ of mandamus, the Department of Justice, the lawyers for the government, they basically point to these issues as their argument. Say, look, this is why it's complex. So it's good to, before even exploring mandamus, to just get that opinion, to understand that better. Is it justified? I don't know. Some things are complex. I won't lie. Criminality issues, for example, when a spouse who's being sponsored has criminality issues overseas, that does make things complex. I can see that. But at other times, it might just be like one of the most common ones, which triggers an interview, and then therefore delays everything, is age gaps. And I find that there's this very like Western North American approach to assessing a marriage that needs to be completely removed, I think, from the training. And it's been pitched all the time. It's recognized at the Immigration Appeal Division. It's recognized at the federal court through numerous cases that officers need to be culturally sensitive. They need to kind of remove that bias per se, and really be able to assess the application on its merits. And so ultimately those are some unjustified, again, I think, causes of delay and defining files as complex or simple.
So I guess sitting down with you and having like maybe a counseling session prior to doing a mandamus is actually a good suggestion.
Yeah, look, go to a trusted lawyer, right? Like it doesn't have to be me, but like go to a lawyer you trust, or at least maybe someone in your network, but get a good opinion and assessment on your file. Because what we also see is that we may see that, okay, there's an opportunity here for a mandamus application, but there's steps that need to happen. And the first is the demand letter. You need to basically notify government through our favorite web form, which we all love to use, and just let them know, hey, we're going down this pipeline, and we're going to give you 30 days, 45 days to finalize this file. And if they don't respond that time, then we have grounds to file in the federal court.
Okay, good to know. So have you done a writ of mandamus in the past, and was it successful?
We often find that our mandamus applications get settled. So what that means is either the demand letter worked, And I just had that actually 2 weeks ago for a family class application for a spousal sponsorship. Our client was just like, and I 100% believe the viewers are probably the same, but like religiously following their application. And I saw copies of the inquiries, I saw copies of the responses, and it was incredibly frustrating to read, because you're sitting there thinking, how is this person just going through this? Eventually they came to us and we said, let's start with the demand letter and see what happens. And the demand letter worked. For another client, this client actually is one of our files that we started in our office. It would be, I'd say, complex. There are some, out of status issues, those kinds of things happening, but ultimately they've been waiting since February 2019. And so we said, you know what? It's gotten to a point where we've done our inquiries and we use just Raj's office all the time. And I don't believe to just get updates, because your MPs usually have a better insight and communication channels with IRCC to get some more detailed understandings of what's going on. But that shouldn't be their job. Like, MP should not, that's not what your taxpayer dollars should be going to, right? At the end of the day, but they have it, we use it because we need to. So ultimately, we filed, we'll see what happens. But what I expect is going to happen is, because the IRCC did not finish the file when we filed, we're going to settle. The Department of Justice will likely come to us and say, you know what, okay, we're going to talk to IRCC and push them to move this file along. And then they're going to tell us to discontinue, we're going to settle. So it's a lot of, wasted resources otherwise, just to get the attention of the department to get a job done. So ultimately, we see mandamus go that way. There is a risk. The case law coming out, I mean, it's for your interest, being a lawyer, I guess, the case law that's coming out right now is really interestingly, we'll see this year, I think more so, but let's say over 2021, COVID did get the benefit. And there were decisions that came out where basically the judges were saying, listen, COVID is exceptional. And what your delay has been maybe 2 years, 1 year because of COVID. And so it's, yeah, like I see you shaking your head, Misha. I'm like, oh, well, I don't know if that's necessarily a fair approach. And so I say, let's see what happens in 2022, because those same people are going to be hitting like year 3. And then can you really just hang your hat on COVID? We've seen, like if we've seen anything through the Afghanistan situation, and Calgary. So Calgary is one of the 3 intake cities for the Afghan refugees. And so I've been working really closely with settlement organizations, just giving like simple legal advice to families coming in and saying, now you have PR, this is kind of how life is going, just be mindful of this, whatever. But what I realized is, if you're able to utilize, like, just boom, like put all the resources into one thing so efficiently, so quickly, then why can't you just do that temporarily for this situation? We're noticing that many people who are applying today are getting better timeline results than those who are stuck from 2018, 2017, which makes no sense. We saw from visa application, the government actually came out and said, hey, did you apply in 2020, 2021? In September 2021, they were saying, and they said, okay, well, you know what, listen, just reapply. We want another $100, right? And your file will be now prioritized. And it's just like how does that make any sense? So ultimately, it's a really I think there needs to be a lot of looking in the mirror, right, and really evaluating what are our priorities here today, from a government perspective. The 1.8 million backlog, yeah, it's a combination of families and economic applicants and what have you, but ultimately it's something that could have been so better managed, I think, and it's not something that's going to just evaporate, right? It's a backlog, and it's going to last for upwards of a decade. Like it's serious, and so that's what scares me, I guess, the most.
Yeah, I noticed that they're hiring on the Immigration Canada website. For those Canadians who are watching this today, if you're looking for work, I'm sorry, but I needed to mention it because who better than a Canadian who's sponsoring a spouse to apply for Immigration Canada and help move that stuff along. But yeah, I think that there's a lack of manpower within immigration, and that's obvious. I mean, if there's 1.8 million, there's got to be a lack of manpower as well as the COVID. So I wanted to ask you, I think that we know what the criteria is for a writ. What happens if a file gets movement, Jatin? Like if it starts getting movement within the application, like within the writ of mandamus, what happens?
Right.
What's the next step?
That's a good question. The most common is the most common reason when we find a delay happening and we look up the notes, if we end up pulling the notes and kind of just like see what's happening in the background, is security concerns, like whatever that means. But it's always flagged as a security concern, and I interpret that to basically mean the company that IRCC has contracted out to verify security certificates is just delaying on their end. So what happens is often you'll see that like you said, in the middle of the mandamus application, in the middle of the federal court application, all of a sudden you'll get some movement on the file on your end. And you'll start seeing, okay, well, here's another notice that just came out. They're asking for updated police checks, or maybe they're asking for updated something else. And it's a very clever way to try and avoid, speaking to the issues that are happening and coming to a resolution. We continue on. Our policy, I tell my clients all the time, I say, listen, this might happen, don't get excited. We're not excited until this is done now. That's what we're here to do. And so we continue on with the mandamus up until the point of hearing if it goes there. And there is federal court case law that says, look, security certificates is not a good excuse if that is really what IRCC is deciding to hang their hat on. So there's supporting case law for those arguments.
Okay, good. So we just continue along until we see that the file is pretty much completed.
The passport request comes in, but even then, like even today, I have a family whose passport request did come in, and they've still been waiting for 6-7 months just to see movement. It's just like, why would it's like you just like, what is the need to wait that long? I mean, if an officer's at the point of a passport request, just watch the file come in, put it in, let's go. Right? How is that just like sitting on the side? It makes no sense to me. I see a lot of like, not to stray off course, Misha, I bet I'm following the comments on the side, and I see a lot of conversation about the visas, right? Like, why can't my spouse get a visa? And I think it's important to address that because from a common sense perspective, that would be the most immediate solution, is start getting these families, visas. But again, IRCC is paranoid. They assume the worst of every applicant, and that's kind of their approach, I find, going into these applications. So because they have this paranoia, visas are getting rejected for many people who are in in relationships with their partners. To understand why, I think, is to understand how visas are evaluated. And among many of the different criteria, one of the things is your establishment at home. Now, the government or the officers can, and they do, take the position that because you're going, even on a temporary basis, because they're temporary resident visas, because you're leaving your country to go see your spouse, you have no intention of going home, you're not temporary in nature, boom, we're going to reject the visa.
But Jatin, honestly, what I find very amusing is that when they send the email for the refusal, they write in the email that they invite the applicant to apply again.
You think you can change
it's
the
like
concern?
a cash grab.
Yeah.
It's another $100, and people do it. They do it repetitively because they're desperate to be with their spouse.
100%.
The United States do it better than us. They have fiancé visas, and they allow the couple to actually experience what it's like to be on the spouse's native land, which is Canada. I mean, some couples, when they actually reunite here in Canada, don't survive because they never experienced what it's like to be here in Canada, and they realize that they don't like the family members. There's a lot of differences. And finally,
it's a huge culture shock, right? That's what it becomes, because just like you said, a lot of families aren't equipped for such drastic, and it is like drastic changes in their lifestyle or just in their lives generally. I 100% agree. We had a fiance visa actually before I was practicing, but there was a fiance visa at one point in Canadian immigration. It just got discontinued. And I mean, the argument is immigration problem, right? Like, okay, I get it. Like, there's bad apples. There's bad apples everywhere, right? Everyone, but that doesn't mean that the majority have to suffer just because of the paranoia of a few. There are checks and balances in the system to deal with that, and so right now is a time that you can really show compassion and empathy, and it's just the government's choosing not to. It's all lip service.
Right? Especially now during a pandemic, you would think that like there would be more compassion when Canada raves about being very family oriented and welcoming to immigrants. It doesn't feel that way as a Canadian. No. When it would, like, I mean, let's face it. I mean, that's why I'm still advocating on behalf until I see change within the immigration system. I won't back down. That's for sure. And nor will you, for that matter. So just to continue, like with the mandamus, just to finish it off, I think, because you have went through a lot of it. What is the estimated time after you apply for a mandamus usually to have like an answer?
If you win, that's usually written in the settlement terms. What they say is, or the judge can even say if you go all the way to the hearing, but usually they say, okay, you have 30 days to wrap this up, and it's an order. And so, and the expectation is you will get that response in 30 days. I have yet to see it not go past 30 days, but I have heard that it can take a little bit longer, but usually it does resolve itself within even 45 days.
Okay, good. All right. So just to let the members know who are watching this, in our private Facebook group, Spousal Sponsorship Advocates, Jatin will be leaving a price list with the prices for the mandamus, but we will continue on with our live for sure. So just join our Spousal Sponsorship Advocates private group, please, in order to see the prices that Jatin is offering to our members. And now we'll continue with the subject of appeals, Jatin.
My favorite.
Your favorite, eh? Okay, so I'll ask you your first question. Appeals. When a file is refused, they need to know all the facts. They have a chance to do an appeal. Not everybody can afford an appeal. When they reapply, it goes back to the same. Hold on a second. I'm just looking at my notes here. All right, yeah. So I mean, basically, give me some information about appeals and what it consists of and everything.
Okay, so appeals are primarily focused on those who have their spouses overseas. So if you do an overseas spousal sponsorship and it's refused, you can go to a tribunal here called the Immigration Refugee Board of Canada and basically appeal the decision. The appeal is most of the time the decision is made because the office overseas does not believe the marriage is genuine, or they believe it was primarily entered into for immigration purposes. I did recommend, like I recommended that interviews be recorded during my time in Ottawa, and it was actually iterated by many people. Like let's, if we record IED hearings, we should be, or any kind of hearing at the IRB, even at the federal court, then we should be able to record the interview with the officer, right? They're not in some exceptional position, and I think, look, the bottom line is what we find is that when a client files an appeal, when we're ready to go through that route, we spend some time, reviewing the minister's disclosure, and we find the interview notes. And so we first go through the entire interview with the client. Do you remember this question? Do you remember that question? But remember, the interview notes are from the perspective of the officer. If there's like translation needs that were required at the time of the interview, well, you can't necessarily trust that the translator even translated perfectly. When I have the benefit of knowing Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, and being able to speak those languages. So when I'm at an appeal, even when we have an official interpreter there, I'm listening and I'm able to kind of jump in and say, well, that wasn't the proper translation. But not everyone gets that benefit. If, you know, I have Spanish clients from Latin America and I have no idea if the translation is going right. I usually have a family member in the room and I tell them, just let me know if anything is wrong, right? But generally these um, appeals, and I think it varies region for region, but basically it adds another 8 months to a year to your file. I recently went to the federal court. So what happened was that we were hired for the appeal at the ID, we lost. And I was pretty frustrated with the decision by the board member. So I told my client, let's go to the federal court. And we actually got the positive decision at the beginning of this month. So it's a great start to the new year for her. But what that means now is that decision forces it to go back to the IAD, where we're going to have to refight everything, and then tell the judge or the board member, sorry, to you know, look at the judgment, like this is how you should be assessing the evidence. The issue in my client's case was that there's a big age gap, and it was a female who was older, and I think the biggest one was that the applicant made 9 visitor visa applications over the course of like 5 years for completely separate reasons, but that was being used against him. And this, you know, client of mine has been fighting since probably 2018, just nonstop, back and forth, back and forth. Ultimately, I hope, and my fingers crossed, it comes to a close soon. But those are the types of situations that people can find themselves in by going this appeal route. And not everyone has the energy to fight. I have seen couples break up because of this, because literally because the immigration system is forcing the situation on a family. There are cultural nuances in the background for some families where pressures back home, especially for a lot of females, unfortunately, right? But from like these more conservative backgrounds, but there's these pressures back home on that person, you know. People think, oh, your spouse never actually sponsored you. Like, you know, this is just kind of filling their mind with such negative energy, and that ultimately results in ultimate stress, because it's very difficult, obviously, to manage a relationship physically distance, right? Like, it just is. You, of course, you love each other, and you're doing your best, and you knew this is what you signed up for when you entered this relationship, to an extent, but I doubt you imagined that it would be this, you know, lag. Like, would it be this devastating to have to go through this experience? People can't afford flying back to each other's countries. People can't afford meeting somewhere in the middle. Like, you know, it's a matter of just, I want to begin my life now, and this is one important chapter that is missing, or one important aspect, and without it, I just can't move forward, period.
Jatin, honestly, just like you just said it, because a lot of couples, like especially like going through such stress, end up with a lot of anger and resentment towards the whole situation, and it takes all the joy out of the marriage and out of the whole sponsorship process. I also think that the sponsor themselves has a lot of responsibility. It's mostly on the sponsor.
Right.
And it's really hard to answer back to family members and friends why an application is taking so long. And it's embarrassing for a lot of Canadians. And people are like, oh, why not just have him come here and visit on a visa? And then it's like, wow, he's from a visa required country. He can't just come here on a visa. So people...
It's like, we don't have anything to hide. I know what you're saying. Like, it's not like they have, like, the spouse in Canada has anything to hide, right? It's just, this is the trap.
It's really complicated. So yeah, and I've seen some of your wins. It's really cool. Jatin's a really good lawyer, guys, just saying. Also, I guess I have another question. Instead of doing an appeal, some applicants decide to reapply.
Sure.
And if they do, does it go back to the same visa office? And why would an applicant choose to reapply rather than do an appeal?
Finances. I personally always push for the appeal if it's on the table. But it could be finances. It could be that at the time of date, and it was like that a couple of years ago, where the ID was really delayed. Like the ID itself was just going through a backlog, and it seemed like it might just be quicker to reapply. It does go back to the same visa office. At the end of the day, visa offices handle certain, like each visa office around the world, Canadian visa office handles certain jurisdictions, and so that's just the way it is. But ultimately, again, like if appeals on the table, I always push for it, because the idea is that you're going to be in front of an objective decision maker, and once you get a decision, it forces PR, like you're guaranteed PR. Whereas in the federal court, of course, it might not be the best route, because you don't get guaranteed a positive decision, but it might be worth it. And, you know, for example, I give my client his federal court application we just won. It was important to take it to federal court, especially a negative decision of the ID, because if you let that decision stay and then you reapply and it's refused again, you won't have access to the ID. The ID, there's a principle of law called res judicata. And what that means is basically that we've already heard this on its same facts, same situation. A bit of time has passed, sure, but unfortunately, because we've already heard this, you're wasting our time essentially. So you lose the appeal. Like you don't get a chance to even go into the appeal. You have to raise new issues, new facts of the relationship that may have come about over that time. Like for example, kids. I had a kid now. Like, you know, it's one example of a big fact change to show the genuineness of the relationship. So that's why, you know, going to the federal court and these humanitarian applications, like all these types of applications, is important, because you don't want to keep a record the way it is in certain instances. But if you don't go to the IAD and you do reapply, I mean, technically you're getting a fresh chance at this. But if a genuineness decision has already been made, right? It's really tough to like by an officer, because it's in your GCMS notes. Then it's really hard to overcome that, unless you really just messed up the application and forgot to have the chat history or have, you know, photos or something significant like that, which isn't the case for most people.
Okay, so in that case, what you're saying is that the agent will most likely go through the notes of the previous application, and that will play a big part.
Oh, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. So my next question is, like, what is the pros and cons of appealing without a lawyer?
Look, like I'm biased, obviously. so if you have a lawyer, if you have a good lawyer, if you have a lawyer that just does immigration, because there are lawyers that do a bit of everything, and nothing to them. I just find that immigration is super, super complex. It's super niche. From all the different areas of law, especially, it's got its own set of procedures. It's got its own process of how certain things and decisions are made. You're dealing with a government agency as opposed to just a judicial body all day long. So it's a very like specific area of law. So having a representative who only does immigration, and in terms of fighting for you, is pretty key when you get into these highly contentious, litigious areas. The benefit obviously is that they're trained, right? Like they're trained to the law. They understand the how decisions come to a certain point, and what are the best ways to navigate through maybe some of the issues that are before you. Doing it yourself is definitely, I mean, look, like it costs money, and that's the biggest thing, right? Like it's a cost. And some lawyers are more expensive than others, and it's purely just how the market works. So if people go in by themselves, there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes it doesn't hurt to get, like, I've been retained to just do hearing prep, you know, which was enough for a family. Like they said, we just want to hire you. I don't know what a hearing is going to happen. Can you please be the judge for us? And we want to go through 4-hour session, 6-hour session. And that was eye-opening for them. And I know they won their appeal. They told me later, but they're like, thank you, because the hearing preparation actually opened my eyes in terms of the kind of questions that might be asked, you know? So yeah, I see Marta is, you know, I see Marta's comment. So like quality of lawyer is a relevant factor. Yeah, absolutely. You Google before you go to a restaurant, right? Google your lawyer, like figure out who this person is.
I think you were Marta's lawyer, anyways. But
Marta, you know, Marta. Well, it's good to see you, Marta. But we had conversations about her file, and you know, I was able to help here and there, and I know she's in process right now, just going through a very difficult time, and I'm with you, Marta. Like I see you over there. and I hope definitely, like wishing you the best for sure. The look, but the reality is with spousal sponsorship appeals, it's just another area where you sometimes feel like you're bringing common sense to the table almost, right? It's like, and sometimes I'm having conversations with the other side, like the minister's council, and I know they're just doing their job, and they are people, and they do understand, right? But they're given a task, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, why are we having this conversation right now? Like, what is going on? How are we analyzing this in such a way? So lots of room to make things more efficient.
Definitely. So I would like to ask you, now that we've gone through the appeal, what is an ADR, and can you ask for it? And how is the decision made for the file to go to an ADR?
ADR, alternative dispute resolution. It's an alternative pathway to getting a quicker answer at the IAD. You can ask for it for sure if you feel like there are grounds, and I've done that before. But it's pretty quick early on once you get the minister's record to be able to gauge, is this actually a quick issue or not? Sometimes the minister themselves, the minister's representative, actually comes to the table to you and say, okay, listen, we're taking this to ADR. An ADR is really different from a hearing. A hearing is a 7-hour process, and there's multiple witnesses. An ADR is a 1-hour process. There's no witnesses except for the appellant, and the appellant is getting examined right by the CBSA officer, as opposed to you're going in front of a board member and you're having a full-blown hearing. So ADR is definitely preferred. It's usually a good sign. It means things are relatively simple. It's just a matter of a couple of questions that need to be answered. We sometimes in our negotiations and because we should be negotiating a settlement the entire time, it's in our best interest of our clients. The negotiation process sometimes leads to an ADR. I just had that literally yesterday. I had one of the officers call me at like 7 p.m. last night. She's like, you know what, Justin, I hear you, because we have a hearing coming up on Wednesday. She's like, I'm going to make a change of date application. Let's go to ADR. It'll be quicker. And I was like, sick. I was like, yeah, like last night I was pumped, right? And so my clients are happy. We're all excited because that means
sorry. When they ask for an ADR, that's a positive sign, no?
I find it's positive. I think that's a signal that, hey, look, things aren't as complicated as they may be. If we can satisfy the officer in that room, then perfect. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes you don't get the consent, but you get a lot of clarity in terms of what are the issues from the officer's perspective. So even for that purpose, an ADR can help, right? And then it's just a matter of, okay, how do we bolster the application or the appellant's record, and what kind of evidence more, like, what should we be looking for then, just to satisfy the officer? And then it might lead to consent right up to before the hearing itself. It's a continuing conversation. Like, look, that's kind of that's just one of the things as lawyers that we well, I assume I in my practice is keep the conversation going. Don't just, wait for the date, submit the application, hope for the best at the hearing. No, you want to engage with the officer the entire way, because if you can resolve this without rolling the dice at a hearing, why not? Right? They're people. They do understand that there are certain situations that people go through. And so having that extra support, I guess, right? Including that into the strategy, I think is really, really important.
So, I mean, once like a file wins like an ADR or an appeal, like, does it go back to the start of like the application, or?
No, if you win the appeal, you get PR. So if you win the appeal, it's process. Like, you're going to get PR. It's just, I'm seeing, for example, we have a family, and I know I read it in the comments too. After the appeal, the family has still been waiting like 6 months for everything to finalize. What happens, for example, is like medicals expire, so there does need to be a medical check again, and police clearances may be requested again. That is a valid request. There's a lot of time between when the file was submitted and when the appeal was completed. But traditionally before COVID, I was seeing things wrap up in like 2 months, like 1 month, 2 months, like it's done after the appeal. Right now, I know I have 2 files actually, and it's been almost 6 to 8 months. And my client went to their home country and they're WhatsApping me and be like, "What's going on?" I'm like, I hate being in this position. Like, this is not me. Like, I don't know what more I can do. I'm calling the officer here, I'm calling the ID, I'm calling. through Jasraj's office, I found for one of my files that the IAD never sent the decision to the visa office. And it was like 4 months into it. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And so we sent it through Jasraj's office to them, which is like, why does that need to happen? So yeah, I could tell you some stories.
I bet you can. I mean, so, like we hear it all the time within spousal sponsorship advocates. I mean, people win appeals and they wait forever to reunite. It's crazy in these times. So I'm hoping that now that we're keeping this conversation going and raising awareness and advocating as usual, that things will eventually like get better. That's why we're here today. I mean, on a positive note, we have to remember that we're here to help improve the system in general. So Jatin, I mean, I guess you went through some of the questions within our Facebook group, our private group, and on our page. Like maybe you took the time to handpick some questions. Do you have anything you'd like to address, or?
I think our conversation addressed a lot of the conversations around where like comments I saw were like we're speaking to visas. Like are these potential visa solutions, temporary resident visas, what have you. There are definitely some questions in terms of just what is mandamus. Sorry, I'm just reading the comments. It's hard for me to multitask to read and talk. But I think I saw one comment actually. It was maybe a few families talking about the whole situation in Cuba, or like having to not being able. Some visa offices are just not making the process any easier because they don't have the facilities on the ground for certain countries. Basically, that is I think an interesting topic to bring up, because it boils down to infrastructure, the conversation around infrastructure. The easiest fix is virtual interviews. Like it's just like mind-boggling to think that is not already happening. And I don't know if it's about security of like the infrastructure, or if it's about not trusting, because the officers want to kind of see you in person, right? They want to make sure you don't have papers on you, and they want to judge that, are you genuine basically about your intentions? Is it that? Are they afraid of being recorded because they can't see your phone or what have you? I don't know. But the reality is that if like high stakes, examinations, if different institutions of all kinds have implemented security protocols for their way of doing business in a virtual setting, the government can do the same. I think of I think of similar situations where privacy concerns may arise, and everything is going very. Such a simple solution, and Zoom is a way of life now. Like, say what you want. It's a way of life.
I love
right?
Zoom. Look at us here today,
right?
And we're recording it, which is even better. We can record interviews.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
There would be less court cases for sure if we can like do the Zoom and record. That would be amazing. Instead of doing in-person interviews, why not just do it on Zoom, but with the recording? So you're right. There's a problem with the infrastructure in Cuba, but look at other countries like Africa. I think it's Accra. They're doing recorded interviews, so they just need to move it elsewhere in the world as well. Like in Cuba, there's no excuse, honestly. I see that you're looking at some of the questions, Jatin.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through.
Yeah, I'll let you scroll. There's one that Patricia asked, but I'm trying to understand exactly what this question means. Do they use precedents from previous cases to form a decision in a case that comes up that is similar to the one previously? Do you understand the question?
Yeah. No, it's basically, do these, like, previous case law is key. That's what my job is to literally research arguments around, here's what happened in the past, follow this line of thought. But judges don't necessarily always follow it. They're supposed to, but judges like to be sometimes creators of law, right? But the reality is if there's cases written down, precedents that you that actually match up your fact pattern, to put it in our terms, then that is something that you definitely want to leverage. when we make our legal submissions and just applications generally, like when we do like when we're starting a spousal sponsorship application, we always do legal research from the beginning. Like it is very common in my applications to have, you know, just like principles and thoughts of how to really approach the assessment of a genuine relationship written in the case law. I have that written out in our submissions to remind the officer, hey, listen, you need to think about these issues this way, right? And ultimately, it just makes me look good at the ID, and it makes my life easier at the ID because I did the research well in advance if it ends up even going there or the federal court. But the reality is I think it does help because it does put into perspective for officers as well in terms of like, you know, are they actually going down the right line of thought, or here's some precedent that talks about people making quick decisions to marry. You know, here's some precedent about age gaps. Here's some precedents about culture and understanding how culture plays a role in the assessment. So all of these different, you know, ways of arguing your position, they come from the case law. And sometimes there are situations that are just not in the case law. Well, then you appeal to just common sense. I find.
Okay, cool. I'm still looking up for some other questions here. I think we've like went through everything, eh? Jatin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that really nailed it. Look, one of the things that I do with various stakeholders, not-for-profits, organizations like this, if you give me a call and you say you're coming from the Spousal Sponsorship Advocates page and you want to talk about mandamus, you want me to just quickly look at your case, I'll do a free consultation. Like I don't charge for those kinds of things when it comes from groups like this. If you just want to talk about your file and kind of get an idea of what's going on, like drop me a line. We'll figure out a time and we can kind of just talk through your file virtually, over the phone, whatever's easier for you. And then ultimately, you know, I can give you an idea of whether or not, first of all, it's even worth your time to go down that road. And if it is, then we can talk about some things to think about. So, I mean, I throw that out there for everyone here as well. So sometimes you have just simple questions, right? You just need an answer.
Sorry, Jatin, can you share with me? Actually, I really like your TikTok account. A lot of people are it's really charming, I find. If you guys want to know how human Jatin can be and how what's your TikTok feed, like your Instagram? Tell us about your social
media. It's man, like you want to talk about something that really puts you in check, it's TikTok. Like that stuff that's difficult. I like it though, it's fun. Okay, so my TikTok handle is CAD for Canada, CAD immigration lawyer. Follow me, like the videos. I mean, if you know, like let me know if there's questions or what have you. We have about 8,000 followers, which is pretty cool, and it's growing every day, and it's a lot of fun to make. But otherwise, I mean, look, a lot of my social media, Instagram, I just search my name, Facebook, Shory Law, also my name. But we do a lot of just virtual marketing, I guess, or try to keep our presence alive in those spaces, just because that's where these conversations happen, right? And we sit here, and I think I saw it peak. There was like 40 or so people just watching this live, and to me that tells me there's 80 people watching because they all have their partners, right? And so there's 80 people who are starting this conversation. This video will go viral, you know, if it goes viral or it's shared around. But people people ultimately need to keep this conversation going. Like, and I'm super impressed that it's continued because momentum does die. But I guess that speaks to the testament of the team that's been working with you, Misha, and I know there's a few other people as well that have just been with you from day one and really putting in that fight, right? Not stopping, even if their own situations get resolved. Like that speaks tremendously about the genuineness of this movement. And I said it earlier, this is, you know, 1.8 million people backlog does not evaporate. It is going to continue. And everyone here has an opportunity to contribute to that conversation and push forward some serious policy changes. So I commend all of you for this. You know, like I think this is wicked to have an opportunity to speak to everyone like this. Thank you.
You're welcome, but thank you, honestly. I mean, it takes two to tango, and Yeah, and more than that, actually. But no, Jatin, it's honestly a pleasure to know you as a person too. I guess I'll do like I did with Jazz and ask you, what do you value most?
I value friendship. I know I honestly just having opportunities like this is absolutely wicked. Being able to talk so openly and freely, share ideas like this. So for me, friendship, hard work, commitment, dedication, those types of things is definitely what I think I pride myself on and like to give to anyone who wants to listen to me talk, right? At the end of the day.
I can't wait till you come to Montreal because, yeah, I can't wait. I
can't
will
wait
definitely host you when you come.
100%. Oh, I wouldn't even stress it.
Cool. All right, guys. So we're gonna wrap it up, I guess. We put our hearts into this. I thank you so much again, Jack. I put you all over our feeds. People will be inquiring. I got some messages privately that some people want to be in touch with you for sure.
Totally.
And that's it. Well, thank you so much for joining our live today. Thank you, Jatin. And I think we're gonna wrap it up.
Cool. It was absolutely my pleasure. Thanks, everyone, and be safe out there.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.